There are moments in life when a single sentence can flip the energy of an entire room, and that moment arrived the instant the elderly woman stepped toward the ATM inside the crowded bank lobby in Chicago. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her worn-out debit card, her thin coat barely shielding her from the cold she carried from the streets. People stood behind her in line, some impatient, some indifferent, but one man, tall, confident, and dressed in an expensive navy coat, watched her with a smirk, as if she was entertainment rather than a human being. When she quietly asked the teller if she could just check her balance, his laugh echoed through the hall. It wasn't loud, but it was cruel, the kind of laugh that made others uncomfortable yet silent. No one expected what would happen next. No one expected the screen to reveal a truth powerful enough to wipe the smile off a millionaire's face and make everyone realize how little they truly knew about people. If you believe in kindness, dignity, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories like this. Margaret Avery had lived 72 years, most of them spent in the quiet town of Peoria before circumstances forced her into the city. Her life had never been glamorous, but it had always been full, of purpose, of work, of routine, and of memories that held her together during the lonely nights. She had been a school librarian for over 3 decades, the kind who remembered every child's favorite book and greeted every student with the gentleness of someone who believed in the magic of learning. But retirement had not been kind to her. Medical bills had piled up after her husband passed, her modest pension barely stretched far enough, and the home she and her husband had built memories in eventually had to be sold. Margaret never complained. She carried her burdens quietly, holding on to dignity the way some people hold on to hope. The millionaire in line behind her, Gregory Payne, had never known a life without privilege. At 45, he walked with the self-assurance of someone who believed the world always bent in his direction. His business ventures had made him wealthy, but his arrogance had built walls around him that kept him from seeing humanity clearly. To him, Margaret looked like someone asking for pity or small change, someone struggling to survive while he thrived. He didn't know her story. He didn't care to. And that was the mistake that would soon shatter his assumptions. Margaret simply wanted to see her account balance so she could plan her next week. She knew every dollar mattered. The teller guided her gently toward the ATM, noticing her hands tremble as she typed. Gregory stepped closer, still amused, watching her like she was a scene from a movie he already knew the ending to. What he didn't know was that life sometimes keeps its most poetic plots hidden until the final act. As the screen loaded, Margaret's eyes widened, not in fear, but in disbelief. The people around her leaned in unconsciously, even the ones trying to pretend they weren't watching. Gregory crossed his arms, ready to see confirmation of the assumptions he'd made. But instead of a negative balance or a few dollars, the screen displayed a number so large that the teller instinctively gasped. Margaret clutched her chest, tears welling in the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from overwhelming shock. A few weeks earlier, without her knowledge, the community she had served for 30 years had come together to raise money for her after learning of her struggles. News had spread that the beloved librarian who had shaped generations was facing financial hardship. Former students, now adults scattered across the country, shared posts, organized fundraisers, and pooled resources. Some donated $10, others donated thousands. A group of them worked with a local organization to deposit the funds directly into her account as a surprise, wanting to give back to the woman who had given so much of herself to them. Margaret had no idea any of it had happened. The ATM screen showed a balance that reflected not wealth but gratitude, hundreds of thousands of dollars raised in her honor. Gregory's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by confusion, embarrassment, and something unfamiliar to him, humility. The woman he had mocked stood there with tears streaming down her face, realizing that she mattered far more to people than she ever allowed herself to believe. The room shifted. The energy shifted. And Gregory shifted too. He stepped forward, no longer proud or amused, but deeply ashamed. For the first time in a long time, he felt small, not because of money, but because of who he had allowed himself to become. He watched Margaret wipe her tears, whisper a soft thank you to no one in particular, and gently place her card back into her purse. She walked past him with quiet grace, not even acknowledging the cruelty he had thrown her way. That humility struck him harder than any words could. In the days that followed, Margaret's story spread across Chicago, and Gregory found himself thinking about her more than he expected. She had reminded him of something he lost long ago, a sense of humanity beyond wealth, a reminder that dignity is not measured in dollars but in kindness and integrity. He reached out to the organization that had helped raise money for her and anonymously donated a substantial amount, not out of guilt, but out of inspiration drawn from the strength and grace she carried with her. Margaret used her restored financial stability wisely. She found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, bought warm clothes for the winter, and donated a portion of her newly found funds to children's libraries across the state. She believed blessings were meant to be shared. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so these emotional stories can reach more people. And before we end, here is a special request. Comment one word that describes how this story made you feel. Margaret's story reminds every listener that life can change in an instant, not because of luck, but because of love. And sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest stories, waiting for the world to finally take notice.